How y'all doing, ATL? Y'all good? Man, we are here with a person that if you are in the media game in any way, shape, or form, you have to study. He has inspired us all. I think that, he's one of the most, underrated people in the media space, Mr. Byron Allen.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Now you started out in comedy at 14.
Yes.
What drew you to the stage at 14?
You know what? My mother, my mother got pregnant with me when she was 16, and Detroit, Michigan. And
What up, though?
there you go, Detroit. And yeah, nobody's betting on a black teenage girl having a baby in 1961. So God is good and America is great. The opportunity is here. So yeah, it's true. So my mother, and when they killed Martin Luther King in '68, Detroit went up in flames, and we went to LA for a 2-week vacation and stayed with relatives and friends. And my mother said, "Do you want to stay?" And I said, "Why not?" We ended up staying. And for 2 years, a lot of sofas and a lot of spare rooms. And my mother, is not only beautiful, she's brilliant. She ended up going to college, UCLA, and getting her master's degree in cinema TV production. And she could not afford childcare. And so she used to take me to college with her. She got her master's degree. She started going around to the Hollywood, studios and networks and asking for jobs, and she got a lot of no's. And finally, she went to NBC and she said, "Do you have a job here for me?" And they said no, and she asked a question. She said, "Do you have an intern program where I can work here for free?" And they said no. And then she asked the question that changed everything. She said, "Will you please start one with me?"
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. And they said yes. And because she couldn't have filed, so she started going there and working at NBC and for free, and then she became a tour guide and gave tours of NBC. And this is in '74, '75. I'm about 13, 14 years old. And then she ended up getting a job as a publicist and in the marketing department. And she could not afford childcare, so she used to take me to work with her. And I used to sit there and wait for my mother to get off work. And I knew I had to be quiet as I possibly could, but I was waiting and I was noticing they were making something called television. So I would watch Johnny Carson tape something called The Tonight Show. And I thought, that's interesting, that's a talk show. Then I would walk across the hall and I would watch Red Fox tape Sanford and Son. And then I walked down the hall and I would watch Flip Wilson tape The Flip Wilson Show. And then I walked down the hall and I said, there's this new soap opera, that they're doing, and then there was a sportscaster doing the local sports, and his name was Bryant Gumbel. And then there was a local weather guy doing the weather, and his name was Pat Sajak. And I saw this guy, Bob Hope, do specials, and on and on.
Well, how old are you, Mr. Allen? God damn.
You know how we are.
Yes.
I'm 208 years old.
Okay.
Well, I'm looking good, But anyway. So I'm watching them make television. Now, up until this point, I'm in Detroit, right? And I couldn't wait to grow up and go to Ford Motor Company with my dad, who worked at Ford Motor Company for over 30 years. My granddaddy worked at Great Lakes Steel for over 30 years. And I couldn't wait to get a uniform, a lunch pail, and go to the factory with them. And then when I was in this television studio and I'm watching them make all this television, I said, wow, this is a different kind of factory. I want to be in this factory. I want to make television. And I loved the comedians that I saw. Red Fox, just immediately fell in love with him. And he was so great. He talked to me like I was his best friend. Like Red Fox, I remember I said, Mr. Fox, that was so funny, because I watch him tape his show. How you doing, son? How you doing? You want some cabbage? You want some cabbage? I go, I don't eat cabbage. I'm not talking about that kind of cabbage. I'm talking about cabbage. Come on, boy. You want some? And he pulled out a wad of cash, this thick, right? He go, here. And he peeled off like $100. He goes, buy your mama something nice. You only get one mama.
Wow.
Red Fox. So I watched a young comedian named Richard Pryor do a variety show. And I was so fascinated watching the executives deal with the talent, the directors deal with the producers, and on. And I said, this is it. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I'm going to be a comedian. I'm going to make comedy. I'm going to produce television. And I don't care if I have to do it for free for the rest of my life. So Gladys Knight and the Pips had a summer show. In their summer show, they had a comedian on. And I knocked on his door and I said, hey, you become a comedian, sir? He said, go to the Comedy Store. I said, okay. I go, what's the name of your sitcom in the fall? He goes, Welcome Back, Kotter. And I said, oh, thank you, Mr. Kaplan. Nice to meet you again, all right? So I called the Comedy Store and they said, yeah, Monday night tryout night. So get here early, the doors open, get here early. People start getting here early and we put people on stage at 7:30. So I got there at 9 in the morning. And I sat there on the curb by myself and wrote jokes until they opened the door at 7:30. I went on stage and I performed for 4 people in 200 chairs. I was 14.
Did you bomb?
Oh yeah, well, 200 chairs. I didn't have much oxygen in the room. And this dude came up to me and he said, hey, that was funny. Who wrote those jokes? I said, I did. He goes, let me get your phone number. I know somebody who might be interested in writing with you. And I said, sure, okay. And I gave him my phone number and I get a call 2 weeks later and this guy says, can I speak to Byron? I said, this is Byron. He goes, this is Jimmy J.J. Walker.
Wow.
Now, Jimmy was hotter than the sun. Good Times was the #1 sitcom in America, 1975. So he calls me up and he says, my man, Wayne Klein, says you're funny. And if my man, Wayne Klein, says you're funny, then you must be funny. He says, do you want to come write with me and my boys? I said, let me ask my mom.
That's respectful. That's what you're supposed to do. Yeah.
So I hear him put his hands over the phone. He goes, oh my, because he was at a writer's meeting. He had just finished a writer's meeting. And he said, oh my God. He has to ask his mom. And then I heard this dude in the background says, tell his mom not to worry. We'll have cookies and milk for him. And then Jimmy said, come on, Dave, be nice, be nice. Don't scare the kid. So I asked my mom, and she said, yeah, you can go. So my mom takes me over to Jimmy's apartment, and I walk in, and sitting there is the biggest television star in America at that time, Jimmy J.J. Walker, summer of '75. I'm 14. I had an afro, plaid pants. It was crazy. And I walk in, and sitting in his apartment was Jay Leno.
Damn. Who like the Black Forrest Gump, Byron? What the hell?
I had a box of candy, too. He was sleeping in his car, Jay was, and another guy named David Letterman. And David had just driven out from Indianapolis in a red pickup truck, and they were getting $200 a week, and I sold him a joke, and I got $25. And I'll never forget, he gave me the check for $25, and I went to my mother and I said, what is this? And she said, that's a check. I go, what happens now? She said, you go to the bank and you cash it, they're gonna give you $25. And I said, I I said, okay. She goes, what's wrong? I said, I don't want to cash it. She said, boy, you need the money. You're going to cash it. And I go, this piece of paper, this check says that I can make it in this business, and I don't want to let it go. She said, no, 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 no. She said, you cash it, they're going to send it back to Jimmy, and then you go to Jimmy and ask for the return check because they'll after they cash it. So sure enough, after the meeting, I said, Jimmy, you know that check you gave me, that $25 check you gave me, did that ever get back to you? Did the bank send it back to you? He goes, yeah. I go, can I get it back? He goes, sure. And he gave it back to me. And I framed it. And 50 years later, I had him on my show, Comics Unleashed, and I said, do you remember this?
Did he remember?
Oh, yeah. Wow. I said, this is when I knew I could make it in this business. Thank you.
Wow.
So I just had him on my show, Comics Unleashed with Byron Allen, and he was gracious enough to come on, and I pointed that out. So that's what made me want to be a comic, and I really learned then, it's not show business, it's business show. And I learned that quickly because I was 18 years old, and I was on a show I did The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. I was the youngest comedian to do The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And I got numerous offers, and I've always loved numbers, and I said, I want this one, I want to do this show. I had 10 offers. And they said, why this one? And I said, because there are 3 networks, ABC, NBC, CBS. There's 22 hours of primetime television, 66 hours in total quantum, and this is the only hour that's different from the other 65 hours. It's a reality show, and I think it's strong enough to stand out, to be on the air long enough to get me through USC Film School, and my mother doesn't have to pay. So I said, I want to go with this show. That show turned out to be real people. That show changed the face of television, gave birth to reality shows, and it was a game changer. So it was just mathematical. Now I was on the show, and I was getting $2,500 an episode, and my counterparts were getting $10,000, $12,500 an episode. And then second year, I got $4,000 an episode. My counterparts, it moved to like $12,500, $15,000. My third year, they didn't have me under contract, and I said, hey, can I get in year 3 what they got in year 1? And they said no. And I was fired. And it was the worst, I thought it was the worst thing that ever happened to me.
You got fired for asking for more money?
I got fired for asking for more money, absolutely. And I thought it was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and it was the very best thing that could have ever happened to me in life. Business life. So.
Was that the moment you realized you wanted to move from performing to building a media?
And that was the moment I said, this is not show business, this is business show. I got to learn the business side, and then I can do all the shows I want. But what it was I was really hurt, because my mother was my manager at the time. I was really hurt that someone said to my mother how little I was worth. And I thought, I will never let anybody say to my mother again, I'm only worth this. So from this moment on, I will never work for anyone else again. So in January of '81, I went to the television convention, NATP, the National Association of Television Programming Executives. And this is where all the people own and operate television stations, meet with people who create and sell shows, and it's pretty much out of business now. I went for 40 consecutive years, starting in '81. And I made it a point to get to know each and every person that owned and operated a television station in America, and each and every advertiser. And I started syndicating my shows by calling those television stations. And when I started my company from my dining room table in summer of '93, I called all 1,200 television stations directly, and I asked them to carry my show for free. Had 1 hour, it was a 1 hour show, 14 minutes of airtime, commercial time, 14 minutes. And I said, I will sell my 7 minutes to national advertisers. You sell your 7 minutes to local advertisers, local car dealers, banks, and supermarkets. I'll sell my airtime to national advertisers. Literally, I got about 50 no's from each and every television station. I literally sat at my dining room table and wore holes in my dining room chair because I sat there from 6 in the morning to 8 at night, and I kept calling every television station methodically, one after the next, after the next. And finally, I was able to squeeze out 150 yeses, and that's how I got my first show on the air, after working through about 50,000 no's. So I didn't know how to sell my advertising time because I didn't have experience. I had a guy say to me, he worked at Tribune, he said, if you get 75% of the country to carry your show, I'll give you a $400,000 advance for your advertising, and that's how you will fund production. Well, when I went back to him and I said, I didn't clear 75% of the country, I cleared 95% of the country. Woo! He said, you know what? I changed my mind. We're not going to give you the advance, the 400 grand. And it was interesting. He said it to me about a week after a television station in Harrisburg, the WHP, and I still remember all the call letters. WHP, the CBS affiliate in Harrisburg, said, I called him up. I said, you know, what happened with the paperwork? I thought you were going to run the show. He said, no, I changed my mind. He said, the guys from Paramount came in here and they said you were calling me from your dining room table in your underwear and that the show wasn't going to be there, you weren't going to get it on the air, so I gave them your time period. And I said, let me ask you something. I said, how many guys did Paramount send in to see you? He said, 3. I said, did they have on nice suits? He goes, yeah. Cufflinks? I said, yeah. He said, yeah. I said, they have their initials on their cuffs there? Yeah. I said, yeah. I said, those guys get paid a lot of money. I said, listen up. I said, yeah, Bob, I am calling you from my dining room table. And yeah, I'm in my underwear. I don't have a commute. Really my pajamas. But I said, listen, I said, the show's gonna be there, and tell the boys from Paramount I'm never gonna cancel the show. And tell the boys from Paramount the reason I'm never gonna cancel the show is because they're never gonna be able to walk into another TV station in America and say that my show will not be there. Ooh. Let the boys from Paramount know, right? Next week, the guy said, I'm not sending you the 400 grand. And I thought about what I just said to that guy. And I said, okay, I'm going forward anyway. I didn't have the 400 grand to make the show. So my home went in and out of foreclosure about 14 times because I had to get the show in production. I could not pay for anything, right? And I worked really closely with the bank. And the bank, there was a lady at the bank, and she said to me, she said, you know, don't let it go past my mortgage. Don't let it go past day 90 because it'll move over to another lady and you don't want to talk to her. So on the 89th day, I would always go pay my mortgage because I had to pay for the tape and the editing and blah, blah, blah. So then we got the show on the air, and I always remember that. And we got the show on the air, and that show is still on the air 30 years later.
Wow.
And my sales team always asks me, they say, how come you don't cancel that show? You want to, I said, it's something personal. Yeah. So anyway, we built this show. I kept putting shows on the air. I kept smiling and dialing and smiling. Ended up with about 70 shows on the air. Ended up with this large library. Ended up going to Verizon and saying, look, I saw you guys are going to spend $25 billion to offer 150 HD channels. I want to give you 10 of them. They said, we'll do 7. We did 7. And then because of the way we operated those 7, a guy came to me. He said, I used to work at the Weather Channel. The way you operate is very different. You should buy the Weather Channel. And so I said, okay, and I went to go buy the Weather Channel. They didn't want to let me into the process They said to me, it was the bank, Morgan Stanley, the guy said, I said, hi, my name is Byron Allen, I understand the Weather Channel's for sale. I said, I'd like to do this. He says, where's your money gonna come from? He goes, you're competing with people who have billions of dollars on their balance sheet. And I said, oh, that's nice. I said, if it's a good deal, I can find the money. He goes, you don't have the money? I go, I have plenty of money. If you have a good deal, I have an infinite amount of money. I said, money is not the commodity, I'm the commodity. I said, 8 billion people on the planet, very few people know how to buy this asset and make it bigger and better than what it is now. Don't worry about the money, I have plenty of money, I have access to plenty of money. Didn't want to let me in the process. I saw that one of their board members was a guy named Sandy Grushaw. And I knew Sandy, and so Morgan Stanley told Sandy that I had called and to try and get into the process and how ridiculous they thought it was that I wanted to get into the process with no money. And Sandy said, oh no. He goes, I know who he is. He goes, do you know who he is? They go, oh yeah, we know who he is. Because Sandy was the chairman of Fox, 20th Century Fox, which is why your reputation is your greatest currency.
Write that down, write that down.
It's your greatest currency. So he said, oh, he goes, oh yeah, I know who Byron Allen is. He goes, let me tell you, he goes, when we sat in our meetings in Fox, we didn't talk about Disney. We didn't talk about Paramount. We didn't talk about Warner Brothers. We talked about Byron Allen. They said, really? He goes, oh yeah, he was a big problem for us, big problem. They go, really? He goes, yeah, the other studios are giant battleships. They take forever to figure things out. If there was a dollar to be made in a certain category in television syndication, this guy was like a little speedboat. He would take his boat, go around us 4 or 5 times, hit the beach, grab the gold, leave. By the time we turn our ship around, he took all the gold. He took a lot of time periods from us. This guy is the largest provider of first-run shows. He has on more first-run shows than all the studios combined. He said you would be ill-advised not to let him into the process. Let him in the process. So they let me in the process because of the reputation. So I said, how much do you want for this asset? And they were told me, blah, blah, blah. They said, you need to prove to us you have $300 million, whatever it was. I said, no problem. So I called the guy up who I met. He managed $100 billion. And I said, you know, I got a really good deal, and I need $310 million. I have 60 from one guy, I got 50 from another. I need you to come in with 200 million. And I said, and these are the numbers on the deal. And he said, don't move. I'll send somebody by on Monday. I called him on a Friday morning. And he gave me the money that night, and we made the bid and bought the Weather Channel the next day.
That's crazy.
And in conclusion,
Byron Allen made it rain on the Weather Channel. That's crazy.
So they gave me $310 million. They loaned me $310 million. And once again, your reputation is your currency. They said you have 5 years to pay it back. And I gave it back in 5 months. And I had a prepayment penalty of $28 million. So they said, because I paid it back so quickly, they were like, well, you know, we wanted that interest payment. I'm like, yeah, okay, I got you. So I gave them the $28 million plus the $310, so I paid the penalty. That's right. So my guys were like, why'd you pay it back so quickly? I go, watch, right? So I paid it back, and the next thing you know, Wall Street showed up and said, we saw what you did with your business starting from your dining room table. We saw how you borrowed that money for $310 and paid it back in 5 months. You have unlimited capital, buy whatever you want.
Jeez.
They will, and just know this last thing in conclusion. Business is a contact sport. You're nothing more than economic athletes. They will see your passion. They will see your stats. And they will always want you on their team because you make them money. You have unlimited amounts of capital available to you if your hustle is at the highest level. Keep your hustle at the highest level because capital is always looking for you to get the money back and a return. There's trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of capital looking for you. Go get it.
Byron Allen, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Great conversation.